Lori here. I'm here today to do the first half of my July reading wrap up. I did wind up reading 14 things in the first half of July. I love summer break. I get so much reading done. I'm doing my reading challenge. I participated in a readathon with Peace Loves Books, which was super fun, which was a historical fiction reading vlog, which should be up on my channel at this point. But I really like it. In the summer I tend to read three genres. I tend to read early arcs that come out because I have a lot of them. I tend to read contemporaries and thrillers and some ridiculously early fantasies normally. So that's kind of what I tend to read. And because this is the summer of the Olympics, I also tend to read a lot of gymnastic content. So we're gonna get into it. But the first book that I finished reading in the month of July was Her Night with the Duke by Diana Quincy. This was for Peace Loves Books Challenge. I think it was for like a couple of ones. It had Duke in the title. It was a single parent romance. This one actually is probably one of my favorite reads I read during that readathon. But I really like this one. But it basically follows this girl named Delilah Chambers. She is a widow. She is coming home to help her daughter in the marriage mart, and she winds up having a night with a man on the road, and that man turns into be her stepdaughter's future husband. It's a lot, but I also like that she had like a career. I've never really, actually I read one other widow romance, but this one I think was probably my favorite out of that trope. I really liked it though. I definitely want to read more by Diana Quincy in the future. The companion book I think is coming out or is out. It's like the Viscount Made Me Do It, and it's about Hunt. I think his name's Hunt. Is it Hunt? Yeah, it's Hunt's best friend who we met in this book. So really like this one and gave this one 5 stars for review. The next physical book I read was probably one of my least favorite historical fictions I've ever read, and that is Secrets of the Night by Lisa Kleypas. This book was of over 400 pages. It was a wallflower romance, and I think I really do like wallflower romances, but this book was just way too long for me. But you basically follow this girl named Annabelle. She's a wallflower, and she's sort of being forced to marry due to some things outside her control. So she's in like a group of wallflowers, and they all decide to help each other get married. It was fun. It was cute. It's definitely not my type of hero that I really like, but again, I enjoyed it. This one was my type of hero. This one wasn't. I liked it, and I'll probably read the rest of the series, but I'll probably get the audiobooks, most likely. But yeah, those are the 2 physical reads I finished for the historical fiction readathon. If I had to pick, I would say my physical reads, I definitely like this one a little bit more. Readathon, I also had to choose a book that was like historical, not set in Europe. So I wound up picking up The Rogue of Fifth Avenue by Joanna Shupe. Here is a photo. Audiobook of this book, and I actually really like this one. I really thought the romance elements was really, really fun. I love that it was set in New York. I thought this one also would be a class difference romance that sort of gets devoured as the book goes on. I loved the main characters. I definitely want to get to the other 2. I also really love the main character and how fierce she was, and how she was really determined to go her own way and not really rely on anyone. There was an arranged marriage in here that was just funny. Not funny, but it was like interesting how it turned out. There was also a court case in here, which I was not predicting, but I really wound up liking this one and definitely want to read more by Joanna Shupe in the future. I know a lot of people that I follow have read her. This is my first book, but I will definitely read more by her. And then the next book that I picked up was not a historical fiction romance, but it is Long May She Reign by Rihanna Thomas. I've had this book for so long. I remember I went to the bookstore with my friends, and we got this because it came out and we all like loved the title, and I was really craving like a mystery or a thriller or something, so I picked this one up. And you follow a character named Freya, and she is 23rd in line for the throne, but when the entire court is killed by poison, she becomes queen, and it sort of sets her on a path. Now, she is a very like she has a lot of like social anxiety. Her character reminded me a lot of Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levasseur, because that character also had a lot of like anxiety and depression. she's kind of thrust into that, and she doesn't like to be around people. So it's a little bit that she has a best friend, she has her dad, she has a couple of other characters. So the cast of characters of this book does increase, but at the heart of the story, she is trying to figure out what happened to all of these people, and there's a couple of other things that happen that sort of make her want to figure out what happened. It was a really good read. I gave this book like 4.75 stars. I want to check out more Brianna Thomas has. I know she has another fairy tale retelling. I love this. So this was a great thriller and mystery. It wasn't really a magic story, but it was set in like a fantastical world, like a fantasy world. Not fantasy, more like a historical fiction novel. But I really, really enjoyed it and wound up giving it 4.75 stars. Her writing style was very, very captivating, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then the next book that I picked up was one that I struggled a little bit with. And that might be my own fault, so take my review with a little bit of a grain of salt. But that's Half Stick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian. Overall, I think I would have liked this book a lot better if I read it in one sit. Like if I would have read it continually, but I took a break for the historical fiction reading vlog that I was doing, so I didn't get to read this. But this is actually Laura Sebastian's adult debut. I did not know that until I got to the very end of the story. But this is a it's a Camelot retelling, I will say that. It was a very interesting read. You're basically in the head of an oracle. So sometimes you kind of float through point of views and you're a little bit confused, like what is reality and what is a possibility storyline. But I like seeing Guinevere, I like seeing Lancelot, I like seeing Merlin, Arthur. I thought it was a great story. I just struggled a little bit with the writing style and following what was actually happening. I think I would have liked this book a little bit better if I read it all at once and not took a break between it. But overall, I did enjoy it. I definitely love Laura Sebastian. I want to finally catch up on her Ash Princess series, which has been a dream of mine, but I would wind up giving this one like 3.75 stars. I liked it. I just struggled with the main character sometimes and the point of view I was in. But overall, it was a fun read, and I would definitely recommend you check it out if you liked Merlin, because it was like a different take on the same story, and I really did enjoy that. Was for my TBR game challenge, and it is an early arc of The Girls Are Never Gone by Sarah Glenn Marsh. This book does come out in September, so I'm teasing you a little bit, but good news, I really enjoyed it. By this author, I read Random Shadows, and then I never got around to reading the sequel, but this is a totally different book. It is a mystery thriller. You follow this girl who used to do a podcast with her boyfriend about like haunted locations, and she's sort of a skeptic. She sort of doesn't believe any of these things are true, but she gets really invested in this house and this house mystery of what happened to this young girl who was found killed in this house. But when she was killed, it was like based around some like leery circumstances. So she goes to this house and tries to uncover what is happening. So this book does have a little bit of a podcast element to it. The ending is a little bit on the open side, I will say that. I also do think that you could have more books in this series following Dare, Virginia, but Dare, that's what you call her. This is also a very like LGBTQ plus novel. There is a female romance in this story, which I really enjoyed. It was very eerie, very creepy, not scary though, which I think is important. And I really liked it. I definitely recommend you check this out. It comes out in September. Maybe wait until October because it's set in like a really eerie and creepy house. It was great. I wound up giving this one four stars for review. I really enjoyed it. And I don't like scary stuff, but I like creepy stuff, and this book was right up my alley. I definitely really enjoyed the writing style, like the podcast element. It wasn't like as focused part of the story, but it was still really enjoyable, and I would definitely recommend you add this to your TBR list and check it out when it comes out in September, because I really did like this book, and I have always loved Sarah Glenn Marsh's writing style. What I'm going to chat about is the anthology called Up All Night, which is edited by Laura Silverman, who also wrote Recommended for You. Was on a blog tour for this, so I was given an arc by the publisher, but let's get into my thoughts, and here is a photo. I really enjoy concept YA anthologies that has like a concept. So all these stories took place between sundown and sun up. I definitely I've always said this. I think short story collections, you get the most diversity that you'll ever see, whether it's race, gender, ethnicities, sexual orientation. You get so much in these stories, and I think it's so great. And then I just want like these whole all of these stories turned into books. Most of them. I also like that this one had a lot of genre representation in it, a lot of mystery, a lot of contemporary. There was one or two, there was a superhero story, but most of it was like thrillers and contemporaries. I definitely found some new authors I'm going to keep a nose out for. But I really did like the superhero story. I think I also really like Laura Silverman's too. But there was a bunch of stories in here that definitely like had my eyes out for new authors. But yeah, so I wound up giving this one overall, I would say like 3.75 stars. There were some stories I didn't love, but overall it was a fun read. And I just think I like reading anthologies because it sort of lets you see what kind of authors you think you would like to see a full-length novel from them. A lot of them do write short stories, so I have added a few short story collections to my TBR, but this was really, really fun, and the concept definitely gravitated me to pick it up. I did read for a reading challenge for my TBR challenge about it also. I forgot to mention the Secrets of a Summer Night was also for that challenge. But the next book I read was Some Girls Do by Jennifer Dugan. This is one of her newest books. I loved it. I've said this before. I think Jennifer Dugan's writing gets better and better and better. I wasn't the biggest fan of Hot Dog Girl, but I really love Verona comics, and this one is like a close second. So you basically follow these two characters. Again, I love a dual point story. If you're going to give me a contemporary romance, make sure it's dual point. I don't care if it's girls, boys, male, female. I don't care what it is. I like getting both character sides. But you basically have Morgan, who came out as bisexual in her Christian private school and was basically ostracized. She was going to a D1 school, and she had to get put into this public school that still had a very, very good track program. And then you also encounter Ruby, who is definitely not out and proud as Morgan is. She has a little bit of a more dramatic home life, but she is a pageant queen. That's what her mom wants her to do. But when she winds up encountering Morgan in many, many meet cutes, their lives kind of turn. And it's just very interesting to see how these two characters develop because they're very, very different. Morgan's very, very out and proud and wants to change the world. And Ruby's not like that. So it was a very interesting read. I think there was a lot of happen in the story, not only about being a bisexual, but also like standing up for what you believe in, but also trying to help other people. And it was a really interesting read. I think especially with Morgan had gone through, I think she was really adamant that she wanted to make sure that no one dealt with what she handled. There's also a lot about suing and like court cases and what this can do for other people. And I thought that this book came out with a lot of good suggestions, like what you can do when you feel like, when you're stuck, when you don't think there's anything you can do to protect another population or protect your own population. I thought this book was very, very well done. I really did like the romance. There was some this book made me tear up at the very, very end. I never cry in reads. This book had me come pretty close, but I really liked this one and gave it 4 stars for a review. And the next book that I wound up reading was I think I probably read this one earlier, but I think I put it in Goodreads so late. And that is The Footmen and I by Valerie Bowman. Peace, love, bucks, and I'm so happy that I picked it up. But you basically follow this man who's titled, and he basically had his heart broken. So him and his friends are drinking one night, and they decide that they are going to go undercover as servants at I think his name's Clayton's house party for a fortnight, which I think is 14 days, and just see how the young ladies treat servants and see if he could find a match that is not basically like a horrible person, because he's encountered that a lot. This book was so funny. I loved Lucas as a main character so much. Like, he is my type of hero. If I could pick any, since I read Colin from the Bridgerton series, I loved Lucas so much. I also am dying to tackle the rest of this this series because it was just a delight. It was so much fun. I loved the main character so much. She was so political, and her and Lucas, it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. It put a smile on my face. I did not want to stop reading. And I want to read more by this author, but definitely tackle the rest of this series, hopefully by the end of the summer. And the next book that I read was an e-arc for a blog tour that I was actually on yesterday, but it's called The Dragon Bird in the Fern. And here's a photo. I love that because the title is so interesting. It's also, we share the same exact name. My name is Laura, and I love the blue and green color combination. But this is definitely more of a politically focused fantasy novel with subtle elements of fantasy, and I'll get into that in this summary. But it is definitely a more political focused story. Also, the main character does have dyslexia, and as somebody that struggled with learning issues my whole life, I really appreciated the representation. I don't have dyslexia, but I do have dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and dysgraphia, all the D's but dyslexia. So I really appreciated that representation and how that representation was sort of winded into this book. But you basically follow this main character, and her sister died about 6 months ago. 6 months is very important. So again, trigger warnings for loss of a loved one, but also learning challenges. If you've had any learning challenges in your life, I would say, as me, I really did feel so sympathetic to this character. But she's basically betrothed to her sister's former husband, the one he was supposed to marry. So she winds up having to go live with him in his kingdom. And she not only has to learn to decipher this new land, but she doesn't speak the language. And she's dyslexic, so she's dyslexic, so she can't read the language, and it's incredibly trying. I really did like this book. Very, very politically motivated, but the biggest thing for this main character, in addition to marrying this man, is also to find out what happened to her sister, because her sister's ghost is sort of haunting her, and if they don't figure out what happens to her, who killed her, then her family is going to be killed. So evil spirits are kind of walking, but it's very, very political. This is definitely one of the best political romances I've read in a while, just because I really did like the main character. It's a standalone, which I read so few standalone stories, so I really did like that, and I wound up giving this book 4.5 stars for review. And we'll definitely check out more by this author in the future because it was a delight. And thank you again for TBR and Beyond for featuring me on your blog tour. I really did like the experience. Enter gymnastics season. It is the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. So you're going to see in my reading vlogs, especially, a lot of me watching gymnastics and being incredibly nervous for my athletes. But I have fallen woefully behind on my gymnastics autobiography, so I picked up Fierce by Ali Raisman as an audiobook. Here is a photo. Ali Raisman and Jordan Johnson and Lori Hernandez are probably some of my favorite gymnasts of all time. And Morgan Hurd. It took me a while to pick up this read, but I really loved it. I love seeing the story from her point of view. I think probably near the 2016 games, she did release a documentary that kind of summed up a lot of the stuff in this story, but I just loved it. I thought it was great seeing her and her 2 Olympic try-on, but also dealing with the aftermath of the Larry Nassar scandal, which she was heavily involved in and affected by and a victim of. Or a survivor of, I guess you'll say. But I really just like getting in her head and seeing how complicated the world of women's gymnastics are and how much of a mind game it really is. But I really did like it. I don't really rate nonfiction, but I would definitely recommend you pick it up. If you have any interest in the sport, I think you would like her autobiography. And then the next book that I picked up was, this was for the TBR and Beyond reading group, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I've had this book for a couple of years. I think I went to Epic Reads Day, and she actually had a family emergency, so wasn't there. But I really like this one. So you basically follow this girl named Amani. She is a single mom. She has a beautiful daughter named Emma, and she is in her senior year of high school. She only thing she wants to do is cook. That's a big thing in her life. She is a very, very good cook, and she lives with her grandmother. Her mom passed away at her birth. Her dad lives elsewhere, so she kind of is sort of dealing with that. She also deals with her baby's father, but she also, there's a new boy that caught her eye, and she gets invited to join this new elective cooking class that has a trip to Spain, I think she goes to Spain, yeah, in this story. Elizabeth Acevedo has a lot of books that are written in verse. This has incredibly short chapters, which I loved. But it also was such like an easy read. You don't ever get main character, like female lead pregnant or teen mom characters that are just so captivating. I learned so much about this character right off the bat. I loved it. I thought the romance was great. The travel elements was great. I always say this, finding books that feature the arts in some capacity is hard. And I find that this book did it so well. It was, cooking, but I loved it. I definitely want to read more by Elizabeth Acevedo in the future. I know people have told me that you must listen to the audiobooks for her on like Poet X and Clap When You Land, but I wound up really, really liking this book, and this is my first 5-star read of the month. And then the next book that I wound up reading was a mystery thriller, and that is That Weekend by Kara Thomas. I actually just bought this book, but I really, really liked it. This is the second Kara Thomas book that I read. The other one was The Cheerleaders, but you basically follow this girl named Claire, and she finds herself on the side of a road with no memory of what happened this week, and only that her two best friends are missing, and she has no memory. And you kind of follow her leading up to this event, and then you follow the aftermath of this event, trying to figure out what happened to her best friends. It is not a short timeline. This book takes place over about, I would say, like a year and maybe a little bit beyond, so it's a longer storyline than I necessarily read in my thrillers. My thrillers are normally very, very short, but this book had a lot of elements that reminded me I Killed Zoe Spanos by Kit Frick, but I like this book a lot. I am a big fan of the amnesia trope, like if you can't remember stuff. I read Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout that had that, but I just thought it was interesting. It definitely did not go the way I was predicting at all, and again, it deals with morally gray characters, and I really did appreciate that. So wound up giving this one 4 stars for review, and would definitely want to check out more by this author in the future. I have a couple books on my backlist that I haven't got around to yet, but again, a solid read. And then the last book we're going to talk about in this wrap up, I just literally finished it today, is Glimpsed by G.F. Miller. And this is a fairy godmother retelling, a fairy godmother story. We basically follow this girl named Charity, and she is a fairy godmother. She sees glimpses, and she sort of leads these people to their happily ever afters. But when somebody, a young man, finds fault with her for doing this, he starts blackmailing her to undo a happily ever after and give him his happily ever after. It was a really, really cute story, and it definitely ended in a way that I did not necessarily anticipate, but I really did enjoy it. I love subtle magic systems. It had elements that reminded me of the Potion Diary series by Amy Alwyn. The romance was super, like the romance that developed was super cute. It had, sort of like figuring out your magic, which you never really see in stories. You always have someone that's just really good at magic right off the bat. But this was really her sort of tackling that. I love Noah as a main character, and I just love the godmother mint that she developed. It was great, and I wound up giving this one 4 stars for review. So yeah, that's all the books that I read in the first half of July. If I had to pick favorites, I would say the books I struggled with were probably Secrets of a Summer Night and Half Sick of Shadows, and the book that I loved was Long May She Reign with the Fire on High and That Weekend. So let me know in the comments what are some of the books you tackle this month, and I'll talk to you guys for my next video. Bye, friends.